So, this is a lecture on the liturgical year, going over the basis for the liturgical year. I think it's important to remember that when we talk about the liturgical year, it mirrors the seasons on Earth. And of course, we have seasons on our planet because of the tilt of the axis of the poles. That is what creates the seasons of the year. So, remembering that Christianity, Jesus' life, death, and resurrection happened in the northern hemisphere, the way that his life is commemorated most closely mirrors the seasons in the northern hemisphere, less so in the southern hemisphere. And when we think about the structure of the liturgical year, it's important to keep in mind that because it is about the life of Christ, the most important moments in his life are what form the basis of the liturgical year, and that is his birth, which is celebrated at Christmas, and Easter, which celebrates his passion, death, and resurrection. Another important word to keep in mind is enculturation. Enculturation is the process of engagement between the gospel and a particular culture. This is the way that the church considers the interaction between its faith and a particular area where there is a culture. And another way to look at it, and this is a more negative way to think about it, is called syncretism. And syncretism is the amalgamation or attempted amalgamation of different religions, cultures, or schools of thought. So the more positive way is to talk about this and other things as regards to culture is this process of engagement and culturation. But we also can look at the kind of more negative aspects of it in terms of syncretism. And so if you think about the Christmas and Easter moments, they do mirror the seasons of the year. So Christmas celebrates light at one of the darkest times of the year, December 25th. And Easter celebrates new life, and Easter always happens during the Easter season. So a couple questions for you as we move on. When is Ash Wednesday next year? Without looking it up on Google, do you know when it is? Okay, maybe you do. But when was it last year? What was the date? Here's another question for you. When is Easter in 2 years? These make you think, right? You don't automatically know the date. But one more question. When is Christmas this year? I think everyone knows the answer to that. Why are some dates movable and other dates not movable? Well, it has to do with the two cosmic cycles here on planet Earth. Those cosmic cycles are the solar cycle and the lunar cycle. And Easter is on the lunar cycle. Now, it's kind of combined, the lunar and the solar calendar there, but it's mainly determined by movements of the moon. And from Scripture, we know that Passover, the celebration by the Jews, happens on the 14th day of Nisan. So what does this have to do with Easter and the Easter cycle? How is the date of Easter determined? This is an important consideration for us because you know that our calendar was, the calendar that we use today, was only formulated by Pope Gregory the 13th. And I believe that was in the 16th or 17th century. So it's a relatively new calendar. The Hebrew, and that is a solar calendar, right? It's 365 days a year with a leap year that happens every 4 years, except in certain circumstances. Of course, 2020 is a leap year. But there are certain circumstances where some leap years don't happen. And this was an adjustment from the Julian calendar, which was founded by Julius Caesar, hence the name Julian. we don't use the Julian calendar. We use the Gregorian calendar from Pope Gregory the 13th. Hebrews, however, use a lunar calendar. Jews use a lunar calendar with solar influences, and this keeps the Jewish calendar within a certain time frame. So it's always somewhat adjusted here and there. But if you have Jewish friends, you'll know that their Passover often is right around Easter time, and there's a good reason for that. So how do we determine the date of Easter? Well, it's really based upon the way that Jews calculate Passover as well. So this year, in 2020, I'll use as an example, Passover begins on Holy Thursday, and Easter, the Triduum, begins on Holy Thursday as well. Easter is on Easter Sunday. So Easter, how is it determined? It is the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. So there's a lot of afters there. Well, two of them. So it's the first Sunday after the first full moon after the vernal equinox. When is the vernal equinox? March 21st or 22nd, usually on the 21st, right? When it turns to spring. So the first full moon after that. And then the Sunday after that. So it's actually not very hard to figure that out if you know when the full moon is. Because the Catholic Church wants Easter to fall, and the whole of the Western Christianity wants Easter to fall within a certain period of time, there are some restrictions about when those actually occur. But what you need to know is these two cosmic cycles, the solar cycle and the lunar cycle. That's why we know the date of Christmas, because it's based upon the solar calendar, whereas Easter, Ash Wednesday, and all the dates that flow from that are based upon the lunar calendar. So let's talk about the structure of the liturgical year, and we're going to talk about with the most important day of the week, and that is the Lord's Day. When is it? Well, it's Sunday, obviously. In English, the word Sunday doesn't really automatically connote any relationship with the Lord's Day, but if you look in Latin or in Spanish or Italian or French, they're all based upon this word Dominica, which refers to the Lord, right? And that is the Lord's resurrection. So what does the third commandment have to do with that? To keep holy the Sabbath day? Well, that's a complex question, right? So why do we celebrate the Lord's Day as Sunday? Why do we consider this to be the most holy day of the year? Well, it is about creation, right? God begins creation on the first day with the creation of light. And it is the 8th day of the week when God creates new life in the resurrection of Christ. So I have another question for you, and that is, when does a day begin? So when does Sunday begin? Now, some people might say a day begins at midnight, 12 a.m. or 12 midnight, right? That's when we count down New Year's Eve, right? We all count down 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, Happy New Year, and we sing Auld Lang Syne. Some people might say, well, it begins at daybreak when the sun comes up. Some people might say, when I have my first cup of coffee, that's when a day begins. Well, for the Catholic Church and for the Jews, a day begins at sunset. And this is based upon the creation story in Genesis. God saw how good it was. Evening came and morning followed the first day. So for Catholics and for Jews, a day begins at sunset. So that's why Catholic churches, after the Second Vatican Council, have masses on Saturdays to celebrate, to anticipate the Lord's Day, because it begins at sunset. It's an important consideration when we talk about the first and smallest liturgical year, or the sacred Triduum. Triduum comes from a Latin word which literally means 3 days. So let's look at those 3 days. Holy Thursday, or often called Maundy Thursday in some traditions. Good Friday. Holy Saturday with the great vigil of Easter. and Easter Sunday. Now it's 3 days, but that looks like 4, doesn't it? But the Easter Triduum doesn't begin until the evening Mass of the Lord's Supper on Holy Thursday. So it's important knowing when a day begins for Catholics that it begins the evening before. So the 3 days are counted from the evening of Holy Thursday to the evening of Good Friday to the evening of Holy Saturday to the evening of Easter Sunday. Those are the 3 most holy. This is the shortest little season of the year. And it's important to keep that in mind because this is the most sacred time of the year for Catholics. And this leads into the Easter season, which is counted as 50 days. The Easter season is 50 days. 40 plus 10. Why 40? Well, 40 because it's kind of a holy number. We hear 40 mentioned a lot in the scriptures. 40 years the Jews wandered in the desert. 40 days Jesus spent fasting in the desert. This is an important number, right? So Easter lasts 50 days, which is 40 from the Easter Sunday until the Ascension of the Lord on Ascension Thursday. And then 10 days after that, we have the Pentecost. So 50 days of Easter. There's another number to consider within the Easter season too, and that is the octave of Easter. The day of Easter, Easter Sunday, is so important to Christians that it is celebrated over a period of 8 days. So one of the reasons many colleges, Catholic colleges, will have off on Easter Monday is to kind of recognize that a bit. But each of those days following Easter Sunday have that name: Easter Monday, Easter Tuesday, Easter Wednesday, Easter Thursday, and so forth. The days before that, Holy Week, is different. That's from Palm Sunday through to the Holy Saturday. So the octave of Easter. The color for Easter is white or gold. Now, Easter is the most important season of the year. Easter Sunday, the most important day of the year. And for that, we have a preparatory season, and that is called the season of Lent. Lent comes from the German for spring, Lents, but in Latin, it's rendered quadragesima, or 40 days. Lent is a preparatory season for Easter, and it developed over a couple of centuries, but it was originally intended for the preparation of those people to be baptized at the Easter Vigil. So for the catechumens, the elect who were going to become new Christians. But gradually it became as a practice for all Christians to prepare for the season of Easter. And Lent lasts, guess what? How many days? 40 days. Give or take. The way the church numbers the days is a little interesting, a little complex, but let's just keep it at 40 days. And again, as I mentioned, this was a season to prepare the catechumens for their baptism at the Easter Vigil. The color of this season is violet. All right. Let's move on. The next season that we're going to talk about is the Nativity of the Lord, also known as Christmas. And that is on December 25th. It begins on December 25th. And there are a couple of feasts during the season of Christmas. One of the first is the Feast of the Holy Family of Mary, Joseph, and Jesus. And we also have the Feast of the Epiphany, which is the manifestation of Jesus to the nations, and we see that with the kings visiting the 3 kings from the east visiting the child. We also see it in Christ's baptism at the River Jordan and in his first miracle at the wedding at Cana. And interestingly enough, the Epiphany is celebrated on January 6th in most of the church, and it was the original date of Christmas, celebrated by all. Another feast of the Christmas season is known as the Baptism of the Lord, and that closes out the days of Christmas. Now, we always talk about the 12 days of Christmas. So the 12 days of Christmas are rendered from December 25th through January the 6th with Epiphany. But the Christmas season itself ends currently at the Baptism of the Lord. The color for this season is white or gold. And Christmas is so important that it needs its own preparatory season for Christmas. And that is the season of Advent. So this is a different kind of feeling than Lent's preparation. This is more anticipation. It's the countdown to Christmas. So you'll have 4 candles which are lit in each successive Sunday. You have an Advent calendar. It's more exciting. It's a different kind of preparation, I think, than Lent is. Lent seems more solemn, where Advent seems more celebratory. There are 4 Sundays in the season of Advent, and the color of this season is violet again. And a lot of Catholic churches these days will use different hues of violet to indicate maybe a different sense. So for Advent, it tends to be a little bit more blues to celebrate that. And in Lent, it's a little bit more red in the color of violet that's used. All right, and the final season of the year is called Ordinary Time. And there are 2 different sessions of Ordinary Time in the Catholic Church. There's a winter session following Christmas season, leading up to Ash Wednesday. And then there is a session of Ordinary Time that happens after the Easter season, so in the summer and the fall. Ordinary Time seems like a really odd way to call it, but in Latin it's rendered as time through the year, tempus per annum. And so it's not ordinary in the sense that it's plain, but it's ordinary in the sense that it's counted Sundays. And Ordinary Time is really the time to explore the teachings of Jesus over the course of these 34 or 33 or 34 Sundays, depending on the date of Easter and the beginning of Advent. Many different factors go into whether there are 33 or 34 Sundays. And then finally, the color of this season is green. Thanks very much. We'll answer your questions online.